You know, it's it's interesting. I had an interesting thought yesterday about the lifetimes that people go through. They go over and over, and it kind of reminded me of an old LP record. You know, let's say that you have an old LP 33 record, and you're playing a song that has 4 stanzas on it, and you go through the first 3 without any problem, and then when you get about halfway through the 4th stanza, all of a sudden your record skips, and it keeps playing the same tune over and over and over and over again, and never ending. And eventually you say, well, I gotta lift up the needle and quit playing the song, because it's just in a never-ending cycle. And in a way, people that get locked into these ideas that keep them lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, or something like that record, it never ends, and they get locked into it. So it would seem like they would need some help from the outside. And you're working with the Real Guides that are here to help people, anybody that's willing to step up and work with the Real Guides. The Real Guides have the ability to show people how to get out of the cycle of reincarnation. And could you tell people how people would contact the Real Guides, and how they could actually take advantage of this opportunity to step forward in their quest for, reality that you were talking about a few minutes ago?
Well, let's go over history a little bit. So we've all come through a lot through lifetimes, and you might say it's the good, bad, and the ugly of what's taken place, and it's all part of our experience here. You know, we eventually get through it, like crawling through the desert. Finally, we find a little oasis now and then, and so we've all come through a lot, different idea, teachings, paths, masters, gurus, etc., and all these things, saints, saviors, what have you, gods. As people research all this, they're eventually going to find out that it's basically not what they think it is. But this is what is happening in creation, and we've had different references, writings, and what have you from the past, and they've become very traditional. And this is all fine, whatever a person wants. But eventually, the individual has the opportunity to see more. And so as I've come into this life, and Paul was to come first, and then I was to bring this afterwards, after him, which this is where we are right now, life is always new. And this is, for the most part, what the personal self, or the human consciousness, or whatever we want to call it, doesn't see realistically, and that is that for the most part, most people are tied to and educated with tradition, which is fine. It's a reference, and if it becomes a reality, then the person just continues on with that, holds to these ideas, and then just keeps reincarnating unconsciously. So, you and Sandy there, etc., we've had a lot of experience together since you kids have stepped up. And you were in the corporation that Paul started, and that was taken over by the people that are there now, etc. And these are just ideas. And so how is it that you get this, I call it the real connection. And so I was shown the new, and I turned it into the new you, and now it's the new you, singing this for about 10 or 15 minutes a day, watching your so-called dreams at night, which I call the real side, or your dream visions. These are other areas, dimensions, levels, or whatever, that start the individual off, and the real guides are there because of their awareness. Life is about awareness. It's not about doctrines or scriptures or sacred writings and all these things. This actually keeps people locked in. And the old ideas or chants like Hugh, Amen, and many of the other ones, well, these now have been taken over, and they relate to the reptilians and the world controllers, etc., because they're physical and astral. And we've gone through plenty of real side experiences, seeing where these individuals eventually end up, etc., and they end up basically with the reptilians because they're very, very tap-lined. Well, the new you with Rebisar and the Real Guides, the Real UNUversal Guides, bypasses all of that. And so it's very simple. I haven't created many techniques like Paul did. I just look at the overall picture, the isness. I recognize this when I was first presented with it, and to bring this out in 2001, I started there, went through a lot to get to here, 2018, today's 2019, all these years. And so it's very simple how to do this. And for the most part, not everybody, but, what happens sometimes at first when people use this, and I remember the old days of using the Hue too, it was the same thing. And when people use the new You, all of a sudden, they have, there's a lot of individuals, even on the real side, that object to this being utilized because it exposes them. And so sometimes the individual goes through resistance from others or whatever at first, told certain things, but eventually you kind of sift through that, you get through it. The focus here is the true reality life is a true purity. There's no restrictions, there's no gods, there's no authorities, etc. As people have, given themselves to these ideas here. There's no worshiping and praying or any of these things, faith, belief, whatever. These are ideas in creation. The new You is the real connection to the real universe, is superseding all of creation, and in a real position where you are a free being of real light. But the idea here is that you have to recognize this. Now it's not just a mental idea that, I believe in this, or I don't believe in that, or I have faith, or I worship and pray and all these things. That's fine. That's a choice. But this is where you begin to recognize this isness life is, because all life already is now. It's a nowness, it's an isness, and it's endless, and it's all alive. Actually, in creation, we are in a simulator, and there's really nothing alive here. The bodies and whatever, they have the appearance, just like a reflection in a mirror. When you see yourself, you appear to be something, but that's just a reflection. And so the bodies, just like your car, the bodies are just vehicles, and they have their own operation to them, just like your car does. It's a vehicle. And so, but the real You, that's the aliveness, that's the all-aliveness life is. But you must recognize that. That's why we're here in creation, because you need, you might say, the opposite effect, and that is to also recognize what isn't real. This sparks the individual's awareness to wake up and to recognize what is real. It's very interesting how it works. And so the what is now, and it's not that I decided this, the real guys, Rebisar and the boys, who've always been with me this whole lifetime, prompting me to get to this, to bring this out, and I've went through a lot to figure this out, to bring something out into this world, because it's very difficult, a lot of resistance with anything. And so, the new, the NU, the new You, etc., was shown to me, and the true reality life is, you might say, decided this, but it's an isness. It always has been. This is very interesting. See, creation, in a way, has a beginning and ending, but realistically, it doesn't. These are just stories that people have been told. But the isness life is, because life already is. It always is, and it always will be what it is. It's just very simple, but you have to recognize it, like anything. And we go through a process, just like as we gradually wake up here in this life, from a young age to an older age, we gradually recognize the environment we're in, and we create our association in our own particular way with it. Well, there's a real environment that is not seen by the five bodies or the senses that we have in the physical body, in the physical sense, etc., with the mind, emotions, memory, etc. There is something that is more real than anything and is everything. But again, now comes the big task. In other words, we've climbed the little hills and whatever, went through the hills and valleys in lifetimes. Now comes the big mountains to climb, you might say, to get the big view. It's a view, it's seen and being. So the new you is what is right now, makes the real connection. These other identities that were created in the past, they worked at their time, but like anything, they've been taken over, and it's all different now. It looks good for the appearance of things in this world, but once a person starts to discover what they're really tied to, they may not want to be any part of it at all. And most of the world is tap-lined and controlled by the reptilian world controllers. And it's not something I decide or make up. Anyone can see this once they look past the appearances of things. You know, it's just like anything out there in the business world. People have a storefront, but when you look behind the scenes, then you start to see what the business is really all about. It's not always about what they put on the storefront. And so it's looking behind the curtain. So the new you starts to reveal that. It may take a few minutes, some people a little faster than others. You too, you've come around very fast. The boys have given you, which I call the real guides, or the boys have given you a lot of experience so that you're able to step up and get through this because, the world is changing very fast because it's being decided to. All this pollution and poisoning that we have in the world, this was all planned, and we're in the middle of it, and most people agree to it, and so it only gets worse. So those that are stepping up now, they're given a chance to be rather accelerated because of what's going on, and I don't see any reason that anybody should be trapped here with the agreement that's been going on. Most people are self-convinced about this place, so we're giving people a chance with the new you. That makes the real connections beyond all the cause and effect of karma and reincarnation right now. And then each person can prove that to themselves by simply testing the new you a couple times a day and reading the books, getting a little information. That's all. It's harmless. If it's not for you, fine, but it does work, especially once you're sincere. The real guides are there on the real side. They will start to show you some very interesting things, but you got to be the risk taker. You got to want the adventure, you know, like you kids have. You stepped up, and here you are. Here we are.
You know, Duane, some people that are listening may think that you just came on the scene and are presenting this presentation, but you've been trained for lifetimes, and there was a plan to bring the new presentation to the planet. So the real guides have been working with you, and you started to plan with Paul Twitchell. He brought it on, and then you were chosen to follow up with a new presentation after Paul died. And there was a corporation that was started by Paul Twitchell, which really kind of got messed up and taken over by negative influences. Could you share that with us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and this is okay. It's part of the adventure, and that's I write a little bit about that in Book 9. And yes, I was there when Paul created what he called his corporation and of Eckankar, and it was fine in those days. I was there, and as time went along, and Paul, it was basically time for him to leave. So he passed on so he could work on the real side with what I'm doing here, and it's basically Paul and Rebisar, but all the guides are there, and even the true silent ones from the Is and the Real Universes are on the real side too, doing many things, but they do not interfere with people's free will. Okay, they present something, but it's not about that, and it's not about coming here and changing things. So yes, it's been lifetimes of preparation. There's a lot of preparation, just like anything, just like you see everything that's been created and built here on the earth. You know, it's a lot of preparation, a lot of years to get something going. It may be 20, 30 years. That's a short time, but it's been many lifetimes to bring this about. And yes, because of when Paul left, there was certain people were asked certain things, and again I explained it better in New Book 9, the real story. And it's not about belief or what people like or dislike. Anybody can check this out and see what's going on. All of a sudden it starts to make sense. It's just like people are waking up to what's really going on in the world with the governments and the banking system and all that. They're waking up gradually after lifetimes of being suppressed and controlled, etc. But they need a bigger picture than just knowing what's going on here. And so my journey has been through this, and I was still in the corporation for a while until 2000, until the real rod of power came along. And so I was to be there to see all that. And so, yes, it was taken over. There's a reptilian influence there. It's very real. And the time that people start to see it, it's kind of like, well, we went over this. I even did a Facebook group on Marjorie Klemp, who was the former wife of Harold, as an example. Some of you, including Sandy and others, went to the real side and saw what's going on, and she was taken over by the reptilians because she made a deal here with Joni, who took over everything. And again, that's fine. Those are choices. The boys, the real guides aren't concerned. Rebisar and the boys, we are focused on what we're doing. We're not here to bother others if they want that, or how the governments are, the banking system, etc., and using their weaponry and all this to control the masses and to even pollute the world and whatever. Well, we're just simply presenting something that makes sense because there's a bigger picture here, but not here to, combat this or, change anything. People are deciding. They have the right to decide whatever they do. And so it's up to each individual also to wake up accordingly. But what I've come through has been my experience according to that. I'm not here saying that I'm right. I'm just presenting something that makes sense, and especially with the all-natural environment that's being destroyed on a daily basis. It's not getting better, it's getting worse. And so this has been my experience coming through that. That is a reference, but it is not the reality that I'm presenting, because that had its time, and the spiritual ideas and the teachings and the gods and all that, and that had its time, but it's no more. There's a bigger picture that's being presented here, but again, you have to learn to see it. And see, I like the challenge and the adventure. This is what I like. So the challenge is always to better recognize and become more aware of the all is, because it is the true reality. And the adventure part is doing something while you're in creation that's a benefit for everyone and everything. And so that's what we're presenting here. And we're not doing it with rules, regulations, beliefs, postulates, rituals, and all these things that people get locked into, which really they become tap-lined by. They have more karma, more effect, and more lifetimes, actually. Those things, we've went through those things. I call them the babysitters. And when Paul was here, he basically babysat people. And this is what these masters and gurus are doing. They're babysitting people, keeping them passive, basically in a physical and astral position. And once they start to see it and recognize it, I would say that they'd probably jump up and say, whoa, I don't want to do this anymore, simply because it doesn't work anymore. It's like living at home with your parents. It worked for a while, but now it's time to get out and, see the bigger picture of what life is. And so, what we're presenting here is the real universe, is the true reality, the isness life is. But the bigger challenge is to recognize this. It's not something that's thought out. Paul did what he called the God Worlds chart, and that was basically in a literal sense. But now it's a recognition. And yes, people do have experiences with the real guides, but there's more to it than just the experience itself. It's this recognition, and very few get it simply because they just take for granted, for the most part, the experiences they've had, and thinking that, well, I had this experience here or there, I know that. No, there's a whole lot more to it than that. That just comforts the personal self, and the individual stays locked in their and self-convinced in their personal self. No, there's a much bigger picture here. To stand real with this all is to recognize it and do that. That's something else. And so again, it just depends upon when the individual wants to do that. But yes, I've come through a lot with that. And again, it's all okay. It's all part of the adventure. Just like in the movies, the good, bad, and the ugly. It's all part of creation. People are making decisions. They have the right to decide whatever they want. And they will be the effect of the choices that they make, and simply showing people how to get beyond cause and effect, where you're not the effect anymore, but you're in a real position where you're all aware, and this position is awesome. You're no longer the effect of anything, but you see and can be whatever you want. This is so cool. So this is basically it, and that's been for this lifetime. And it really doesn't matter what the individual comes through, just like you and Sandy and others. It's getting to the point where this reality is starting to be recognized, and then you might say you do something about it to activate the continuous becoming more aware of it. And so that's what we're showing everybody. So that's where I'm at, and it took me a while to figure it out. I saw this isness. I did recognize it, but then there's more to it, and to also implement something that helps activate it, that's what we're doing. So that's what's taken a few minutes, but here we are, and there's a lot more to come.